Here's what I learned from him. One, you couldn't kill the thirst in him for intelligence and good information. Few days back, I gave an interview in which I said I am addicted to drinking intelligence. That addiction I inherited from him. He would drink intelligence, and he would value, appreciate, and cherish good information. That is a very rare trait in the leaders, to be appreciative of good things you take to them.
A week after I saw Saleh, he took his message to America. He'd been invited to give the keynote address at a major Washington conference on terrorism. That's him talking with Michael Hayden, former director of the CIA.
We hear the speeches of major Western politicians saying failure is not an option. Now it seems as if failure is an option.
In his speech, he blasted the Karzai administration.
Because everybody is desperate for a deal.
Do you have intentions to run for president?
It will be wrong to say yes or no. I want to contribute. Presidential position is not the only meaningful one.
A deal will be a disaster both for Afghanistan and for the United States.
Are you worried about what happens when the Americans withdraw?
Yes.
What will happen?
If they happen and the situation is the way it is, it will be disaster. Massacre of people, bloodbath, disintegration of power, fragmentation of authority.
Why should America stay here and sacrifice the lives of its young indefinitely?
Why did they come here? They came here for three distinct objectives. Defeat al-Qaeda, make the Taliban irrelevant, create a viable Afghan state. If those objectives are achieved, good.
And according to Amrullah Saleh, the biggest problem is Pakistan giving safe haven to Taliban leaders.
The senior Taliban leaders, we would learn about their locations every day. We would have their telephone numbers.
You had their telephone numbers?
Absolutely.
And you passed those to the U.S.?
Sure.
Saleh says many of those numbers were traced here to Quetta, Pakistan, where the Taliban senior leaders known as the Quetta Shura are based. Was any action ever taken against them?
Not against Quetta Shura, never.
The U.S. could have taken action against senior Taliban
They can
leadership.
take action tomorrow.
They still can?
Of course.
And they don't?
They don't. That's why I say the surge is not addressing the fundamental question. What do you do with sanctuaries in Pakistan?
Sir, do you know the whereabouts of Osama bin Laden or Ayman al-Zawahiri? Do you have credible information on where they are?
They are not in Afghanistan. I am very sure and confident of that.
Do you have any credible intelligence on where they could possibly be now?
I don't have actionable intelligence.
Have you ever had credible intelligence over the past 7 years? When was the last time you had?
Of course. We arrested a person who escorted bin Laden and Chitral in the Blifpi area of Pakistan, and he is in jail. He's an operative of the Pakistan government, and we have allowed that man occasionally to speak to the media. Yeah. Why not? Yes.
Okay, tell me a little bit about what happened in 2007. You were still intelligence chief in Afghanistan, and I believe you had evidence which you presented to then Pakistan President General Pervez Musharraf about Osama bin Laden. Tell us a little bit about that.
In 2005,
we came to a concrete belief that Osama bin Laden was not hiding in the tribal areas of Pakistan and Fatah or along the border with Afghanistan, because it's very difficult to hide in those areas. He must be in the settled areas of Pakistan. He must be in the cities of Pakistan. So as we have it in our profession, we enhanced the access of our sources, and we developed more sources to track down Al-Qaeda operatives, both in the tribal areas, and see the wider network in the entire country of Pakistan. So we were watching Karachi, we were watching Islamabad, Peshawar, and Quetta. We narrowed it down not to exactly Abbottabad, but we narrowed it down to Mansehra, which is about 12 miles from Abbottabad. We spotted Al-Qaeda safe houses there. We spotted communications of Al-Qaeda in Mansehra, regular communication between Mansehra tribal areas and between tribal areas and Afghanistan. So we established the link. Although it was to a degree sketchy, not exactly actionable, but it was giving enough both solid ground and evidence to the Pakistanis to act. So I was accompanying President Karzai to Pakistan, and we had a meeting.
This is in 2007.
In the meeting, the Pakistan side was led by President Musharraf and his army chief and his intelligence chief.
So then Army Chief Ashfaq Yani.
Then the army chief was Musharraf himself.
Okay, sure, of course.
Ashfaq Kayani
was his ISI chief.
ISI chief.
Yeah.
And the Afghan side was President Karzai was accompanied by Defense Minister, National Security Advisor Aspanta, and myself, and also a few others. So there started the 1+3 meeting. So it was Musharraf with his army, with his intelligence chief and one more person, President Karzai, and with 3 of his ministers. So we discussed the situation in the region and why Afghanistan was not stabilizing. We very, very politely brought into the attention of President Musharraf that his government and his intelligence was aiding the Taliban. And by virtue of aiding the Taliban and having this policy, conducive policy of allowing Taliban to operate out of Pakistani soil, Al-Qaeda was also operating out of Pakistani soil, and we had both circumstantial evidence and to some degree hard evidence suggesting presence of bin Laden in Mansehra.
Okay.
So President Karzai asked me to hand over physically the dossier we had prepared with geocodes and all the intelligence we had to Pakistan president.
Geo-coordinates.
Geo-coordinates was also part of the dossier, which was narrowing down the area, the villages, the street where we had spotted Al-Qaeda safe houses. This was not tribal areas. This was settled Pakistani cities.
Okay. And what did Musharraf say?
Well, when I handed over the dossier to Musharraf, and page 1 was location of possible location of bin Laden and Mullah Omar, he didn't read beyond half of the page.
Okay.
And he banged both the dossier and he banged the table and he said, "This is nonsense. I am not President of the Banana Republic. Pakistan is a solid, strong country, and Pakistan Army is professional army, and our intelligence is professional. And if I know where Mullah Omar is, I will take my gun and go and shoot him myself."
So they were completely not willing to listen to you. But did you?
It was not the way he spoke. I was amazed to see
There was no composure of a president. There was no stature of a president. There was no, the conversation was not dignified enough to say this was coming from president of a nuclear state. It was, I dare to say it, but it was a very cheap conversation from their side, you know, banging the tables, losing temper, and calling the Afghan intelligence lowly. Throughout my career as intelligence chief of Afghanistan, I do not remember a single moment Pakistanis being able to look into my eyes and say, this is wrong. Because they knew I was not wrong, I was not lying.
Including Ashfaq Kyani.
Oh, yes. I had the same meeting with Ashfaq Kyani in Bagram in 2006. I presented him evidence of Taliban safe houses and training centers in Pakistan. He said, how do you know these? I said, General, let me offer a blasphemous proposal. I give you my sources with the guarantee from the Americans so that my sources will escort your officers and take them to Taliban safe houses in your cities. He said, again, he lost temper and he said, you are telling me that you spy in my country? I said, that's my job. Since you do not show trust in my intelligence, I am ready to do this blasphemous thing of giving you my source so they can show you where the Taliban are not hiding but working in your country against us.
So,
the Pakistani Army Chief General Ashfaq Kyani says it is not productive or fair to single out Pakistan.
You see, I admire that country for being so masterfully deceptive. Why? Until they did the nuclear tests, they were telling you we don't have the bomb. That was their narrative.
They say quite clearly, I mean, even the Haqqani network, which is described as an organization that is based in Pakistan that supports the Taliban and even al-Qaeda, its leader, Siraj Haqqani, has said, we don't get any help from Pakistan.
Why he is saying it now? You see,
what,
because
to refute the kind of statements that people like you are making,
the
perhaps?
Pakistanis told him to do that interview. I know like back of my hand that the ISI is
That's
in
the
cahoot.
Inter-Services Intelligence, the Pakistani Intelligence
of Pakistan
Agency.
is in cahoot with Haqqanis. And Haqqanis are operating out of Pakistani soil.
But you say that, but the head of the ISI, General Ahmed Shuja Pasha, says, and this is a quote, that we have not paid a penny, nor provided a single bullet to the Haqqani network. So where do you get your information from?
You see, that's why I said that the Pakistani state is so skillful in literature of deception.
So you're saying that General Pasha is deceptive?
Of course.
He's deceptive.
But they have said in the past that, you know, some of the numbers that you've given them and provided them are either old or they weren't able to...
This is the funny part of it. Why should I tell them where al-Qaeda lives in Pakistan? They have not been in war like us for 30 years. Their army has not collapsed like ours several times in the past 60 years. They have not been invaded in the past 30 years. They have a functioning institution called army which has never collapsed. Why they wait for me to tell them where is terrorists in their soil? Why? I think that doesn't make sense. Look, they are able to detect everybody else in Pakistan, but not the Taliban, and they wait us to tell them where is an insurgent leader and where is the training ground for them. This is a joke.
Sir, you've repeatedly said that would-be suicide bombers who have been captured by the security services in Afghanistan are Pakistani nationals who say that they've been trained or funded in Pakistan. Actually, we met two of those would-be suicide bombers, actually here in the intelligence agency headquarters. They were being kept in the jail here. And when we were questioning them, they didn't seem to bring up the fact that, the Pakistanis were behind their attacks. What they said was that they were doing this or allied to Islamic groups and doing this for the sake of jihad.
Where?
Here.
Where they were trained?
They did not say where they were trained. They refused to say. They did not have any, they denied being in any way connected with the Pakistanis.
That's the difference between Al Jazeera and an intelligence service. So you cannot find the depth of the problem just by interviewing a suspect.
So you say you have all this hardcore evidence that the Pakistani military and the intelligence are behind the attacks. Why do you think they're doing this? What is their aim?
You better ask them.
Now, every time I am asked if we have a smoking gun as a hard evidence in our hand to show they are with the Taliban, with all due respect to the host country, supposedly there is a Taliban office here. Where are they come from? They fly either from Islamabad or Karachi. When they come to Doha, they come from Karachi, Islamabad or Lahore. And when they go back for consultation with their leaders, they go from Doha to Karachi or Islamabad. So Pakistan serves as the headquarters of the Taliban. That shows the level of the tolerance of the Pakistani establishment for not only Taliban, but extremist groups as a whole in that region. But for pushing the Taliban to negotiate with the Afghan state is through Islamabad, through Rawalpindi. But on the role of the ISI, when we talk about the ISI, we specifically talk about 3 departments of ISI who are involved in Afghanistan, and their involvement goes back to the very early days of the creation of Pakistan as a state. But these 3 departments of ISI were massively assisted back in the 80s by the NATO bloc to defeat Soviet forces in Afghanistan. And these 3 divisions are Directorate S, which specifically is designed for Afghanistan when it comes to sabotage, manipulation, financing, etc., etc. Then we have the SSG, a Special Services Group. This is part of the army. These are special units. They were created back in the 50s with the help of the United States to be prepared for countering communist insurgency in Pakistan. But since their creation, they have been more involved with Afghan adventure until today. And some of the units from the SSG were fighting alongside the Taliban in northern Afghanistan, and they were evacuated based on a understanding with United States post 9/11. And there is what used to be, but is still functioning, Afghan Logistics Cell. Afghan Logistics Cell is a transport network functioning within Pakistan, handled by ISI. So when they transport stuff for the Taliban, and if these stuff are stopped by regular Pakistani police, it is the ISI liaison telling them to release these convoys. Why I went into details of outlining which sections of ISI handle Afghan situation, it's because sometimes in order to justify no action or soft action against Pakistan, they say, perhaps there are rogue elements. It's a big country and big organization, rogue elements. We are not talking about rogue elements. ISI is a very disciplined organization. Pakistan Army is a very disciplined organization. You have seen very few defections of the Army officers. You have seen very few defections of the ISI officers to other countries. So they remain very loyal to the system. And I totally agree with Mr. Hossein Haqqani that the country for many years is punching above its weight. They are hoping to dismember and dismantle big countries. They want to handle, while they are suffering from energy crisis, governance crisis, it is a country sinking into ethnic politics. But yet when it comes to the project of Afghanistan, they are as overconfident as they were in '88.
I want to bring you to an earlier comment of yours where you said there was creeping Pakistani invasion. Are you saying that the Pakistani establishment was supporting or merging with the Afghan Taliban and promoting an ideology of violence?
In 1992, the Mujahideen forces who captured Kabul, they were not puppets of Pakistani establishment. They were mainly forces loyal to late Commander Ahmad Shah Massoud, who the Pakistanis did not like, and with whom they did not have a good and straight relations. So since 1992, Pakistanis relaunched another frustrating warfare to capture Kabul through Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who was their boy, who was their main man within the Mujahideen groups. Hekmatyar brutalized Kabul. He bombarded Kabul city. He basically reduced more than half of the city to rubbles and ruins, and became a hated figure. And he could not achieve what the Pakistanis wanted of him. So they created the Taliban.
All right.
When they created the Taliban, the difference between 80s and early 90s was that Taliban were directly trained, assisted, helped both strategically, operationally, and tactically by Pakistani army. So, for example, SSG was fighting alongside the Taliban. It is Special Services Group, which is an elite Pakistani commando group.
This is in the 90s.
However, as our distinguished colleague from Pakistan said, for Pakistan, the game is an India-centric game. It's an India-centric strategy. They want Taliban to control East and Southern Afghanistan to create a buffer. In other words, Pakistan is trying to expand the borders of the federally administered tribal areas so that India's access and the perceived influence is evicted from those parts of the country, and the border is controlled by a proxy friendly to Pakistan. I totally agree with my friend that Islamabad is afraid of Talibanization, but they are not working with us to dismantle the Taliban. They are giving the Taliban resources and enough incentive to look towards Kabul. That's not the solution. If Islamabad starts to act like a state and deal with the state as India does, and stop dealing with non-state actors in Afghanistan, the situation will change dramatically. So,
Thank you. Well, I mean, finish your thought. Okay. I apologize, but
what you leave behind, if again I said those two things are not done, reform and a very clear definition of who is the enemy, which is now blurred, we will have a muddle-through strategy, a status quo continuing, and there will not be breakthrough. However, we will not collapse and fragment as it is predicted by certain pessimist circles.
Thank you.
My friend Mr. Sethi said very good things. If I retrieve my diary from 2003, 4, 5, all the way to the day President Musharraf resigned or was forced to go, it was the same thing. we are not Pakistan of before, we are being hurt, we cannot fire into our own leg. This is Northern Alliance literature, we are being a scapegoat. We have changed, it's a new Pakistan. It is the same literature, but the behavior has not changed. I gave you an evidence that the behavior was not changed. About 10 days ago, a US, Afghan, and Pakistan delegation met in Islamabad. And they specifically agreed on something called safe passage to facilitate the Taliban talks. What is practically the meaning of the safe passage? Pakistan will find a Taliban leader from below the table and say, look, he wants to talk. According to the safe passage agreement, we have to give him security in Islamabad. They have these leaders in Quetta, in Lahore, in Peshawar, in Karachi. They provide episodic cooperation to the United States. They will never provide wholesale cooperation because in their interest, militant extremism is considered a deterrence for Pakistan's defense next to their nuclear arsenal. Now, what he said about President Karzai saying to the Pakistani Prime Minister that these bases are against you, well, there is a very firm belief in Islamabad, very firm, that TTP, the Pakistani Taliban, are actually a group receiving assistance from India, Israel, and United States secretly to destabilize Pakistan down to zero governance and then denuclearize it. That is why they want NATO to fail in Afghanistan. They are of the view that a democratic Afghanistan poses a greater danger to Pakistan than a failed state.
Well, I'm not sure if we've provided lots.
But the Pakistanis would probably say that you are underestimating how complicated their situation is, and that the concept that they should either control or stop or start Taliban activity, for example, in Afghanistan, is not quite as easy as it.
I think it's very easy. For 14 years, they milked the West under the pretext that we want to fight the Taliban. Now they come to the same West. They say, give us more money, we bring them to the talks, which means they never fought them. They kept them for this day to double charge you. It's not that complicated. It seems complicated to you guys, but we are in the same neighborhood. You know, Sweden may look very complicated to me, but for you it's here. You can see it from this side of the river. Pakistanis come to the West and they frighten the West. Oh, all people are with turbans. How we know this is the Taliban? That's non-Taliban nonsense. We know. The Taliban leadership is in their guest house. They are not in some cave. The sons and daughters of Taliban leaders go to colleges in Islamabad. They have Pakistani passport flying to Qatar for talks. You know, yes, when they speak to you, they may impress you with complications of their presentation, but when they are with us, they cannot look into our eyes because they lie. Now, this said, the other question you asked was the Afghan-led peace process. Of course, we are seeing a change in Pakistan's attitude. Let me be very clear and specific how we interpret that change. In the past, Pakistan establishment was reaching out to Pashtuns of Afghanistan saying, this is a northern-dominated government and you have to rebel against it. Now they are reaching out to so-called non-Pashtuns and they say, this is a Pashtun government. We want to facilitate talks between you and the Taliban. Let us bypass the Afghan government. This brings us to a simple conclusion. Pakistan doesn't want a functioning state in Afghanistan. So whenever they have the chance, they want to bypass it and factionalize the Afghan society and dominate our country through a faction that they support. Because in 2011,
the Pakistanis came with a very specific dossier to Afghan president, and they had 5 demands. Demand 1 was, okay, if Mr. President of Afghanistan, if you want us to facilitate talks with Taliban, we need Afghanistan and Pakistan to create a strategic framework for our relationship, and that relationship should involve these demands. A, India should be evicted from South and East Afghanistan.
Okay.
What does it mean, evicted?
Meaning shut down the consulates.
Well, I mean, it had to be defined, but that was demand 1. Demand 2, 1/3 of the Afghan Army officer corps be trained in Pakistan. Demand 3 was Afghanistan should not sign a strategic partnership agreement with Americans.
With Americans?
No, they said.
Or with India?
Or with India.
Okay.
And we will fill the void. That's what they had said. You don't need partnership with Americans. Demand 4 was in Afghanistan and Pakistan should speak about security of the border. They don't call it border negotiations because that's a very touchy issue for them, so they call it security of the border.
Okay.
Demand 5th was Afghanistan and Pakistan talk about water sharing and water because we have shared rivers, which is good. I mean, it should have been done. And demand 6 was that in South and East Afghanistan, Pakistan, China, and Afghanistan should create a consortium with the to have monopoly for extractive industries of all sorts, and
Copper,
there should
gold,
whatever, and there should be no Indian company operating in these areas of Afghanistan. Which brings us to one point: Pakistan's policy in Afghanistan is India-centric.
That just as Osama bin Laden was found in Abbottabad in 2010 by the Americans, do you think that there are other senior al-Qaeda figures like al-Zawahiri? Where is he? Nobody knows where he is.
I think the easy way to find al-Zawahiri is capture those guys who have gone from Pakistan to Qatar for the so-called negotiations. Give them a little tough time and they will tell you which Pakistan city Zawahiri is hiding.
And where do you think he's hiding?
He's hiding in settled areas of Pakistan. And I know, like back of my hand, some people in Pakistan establishment knows where he is hiding, because every single senior Taliban or Al-Qaeda who have either surfaced or captured or killed have been found in Pakistan.
So you're willing to put your reputation on saying that al-Zawahiri, the senior-most al-Qaeda leader, is in Pakistan today?
I have not made a mistake in the last 14 years, and I don't think my next bit will be wrong. So.
I mean, you say that he was a fictitious character that we haven't really seen. We've seen one image of him. I mean, what do you make of the Taliban nexus now and the subgroups? Where does this leave them?
You see, you talk to any Taliban field commander, and I have the experience of talking to many dozens of them, and I have experience of talking to some top Taliban leaders when they were in power. I was a member of the negotiating team with them in Geneva, in Turkmenistan, and also in Tashkent. So I have first-hand experience about the Taliban. In the recent years, no one had seen Mullah Omar, and all these strategic messaging was done in his name. Whereas, we all know Mullah Omar was an illiterate person. He was not a strategic thinker. He was not an academic. And he knew very little about the operations. So he was put in this mythical space where everything was done in his name from the Pakistani side. Now, for us, it is not a big news that he is dead, because for us, he was not a factor. For us, the real factor on the other side of the equation has always been the establishment in Pakistan and the Pakistani army.
Okay, back to Pakistan, the tribal belt, the lawless areas of Pakistan. Do you think, the strongholds of, the Taliban or foreign fighters, do you think the Pakistani government has lost control of those areas?
No.
Why?
When did they try to control it?
They have launched a lot of military operations against the groups there.
When?
Over the past few months, and we're seeing now a major military operation in the Bajur region.
I am not sure. I am not seeing any Pakistan military activity in Miram Shah.
Why would you want military activity specifically there? What kind of information do you have?
Because that's where terrorist groups are headquartered. And of course, for arresting the Taliban Leadership Council in Quetta, you don't need a military operation. You just go and soft knock their safe houses and arrest them. Why they should need military operations? They have allowed these massive anti-Afghan propaganda out of their soil. That doesn't need military operation. Taliban leaders are living in Hayatabad township in Peshawar. That's the elite district of Peshawar. Pakistan military does not need to launch military operation in Hayatabad. They can go and arrest these leaders of Taliban.
But some in Pakistan actually accuse your agency of sometimes interfering in the affairs in Pakistan's internal affairs.
How?
By providing support to certain tribal elders to actually fight the government and stand up against the Pakistani government. These are accusations made by some Pakistani officials.
We don't need that. Our agenda is very simple. We want peace for Afghanistan. We have no regional ambitions. We are not considering ourselves a core state in this region with regional ambitions.
Before discussing the evidence, when you accuse Pakistan as the intelligence service, do you accuse the institution or do you accuse rogue elements within that institution?
We have never bought into this concept of rogue element. Pakistan army is a very professional army. It's a very disciplined army. Pakistan military is a very disciplined military. ISI draws it as a staff and personnel and officers from Pakistan military. There can't be rogue elements in that military. So when they do it, it is based on their intention and policy. Rogue element does not make sense. It has never made sense to us, and it's not making any sense now. It is impossible for a rogue element to have access to cash, to weapons, to airports, to seaports, to government secrets, and to formulate a policy for a country. No, it's not the case.
So you say you have a lot of piles and piles of evidence. It's a very big accusation. Can you give us an example? Any intelligence information, for example, that you provided the Pakistani side with, for example, any information on a top leader of the Pakistani Taliban or the Taliban or Al-Qaeda?
First of all, the expectation of the Pakistani intelligence service from us is unrealistic, because they want us to tell them what is happening in their country. That by itself in its very nature is wrong. They know what's going on in their country. Number two, let's say we deal with unrealistic expectation or demand of the Pakistani intelligence that we should tell them who is using their soil against us. We have done that. We have done that. There are training camps in Pakistan in which they train insurgents, send them over to Afghanistan. If real pressure is applied on Pakistan, ISI is a very, very disciplined organization, very disciplined. They will listen. But the reason ISI seems rogue, it's part of the game to look rogue. They are not rogue. It's a very disciplined organization. If Pakistanis come to conclusion that this is it, we have to behave nicely, then things will improve. They have not come to that conclusion. I want to quote these three gentlemen. Three of them said, Lashkar-e-Taiba is a creature of Pakistani military establishment. ISI was involved in Mumbai bombing. Lashkar-e-Taiba is working with Al-Qaeda. Ilyas Kashmiri is now becoming a very important operative or master of operations for Al-Qaeda. So we talk about all these proxies, but not the master of proxies, which is the Pakistan Army. The question is, what does Pakistan Army want to achieve? By saying to Washington, we are victims, going back to the Rawalpindi being the masters of all these proxy operations. They want to gain influence in the region. Now, they may tell you, look at the suffering of our people. Their people do suffer in tribal areas, in the expendable part of Pakistan. You continue to hear the news about suffering of people in tribal areas. The establishment is not shocked, but one bomb blast in Rawalpindi or in an inner cities of Pakistan, that's what they take very serious. So Pakistan believes that by promoting these proxy groups, even if there is a leakage, even if there is a spillover, it will be like fire in the servants' quarter. It will not burn the main palace. That is their theory. And for them, tribal areas is like the servants' quarter, even if it continues to burn forever.
You said make a distinction between the people and the establishment.
Sure.
The army is the establishment in Pakistan,
Yes.
right? Yeah.
Right.
They have lost 10,000 soldiers since the conflict in Afghanistan, the invasion happened.
That has to be verified.
Well, that's what they say.
That's what they say. They say
30,000 civilians.
that has to be verified. Maybe, but those are leakages of their own wrong policies.
But they've shed blood, they've lost money as a result of the conflict in Afghanistan.
I disagree. They have lost money. Let me give you an example. They used part of the Western assistance and backing for the anti-Soviet resistance back in the 80s to build their nuclear bomb. You think they are losing money, but they are making money by being an ally of NATO and in the meantime an enemy of NATO. Don't treat us as an expendable corner of the world. One way or another way, that country is going to come after the West in one way or another because they are not honest. They are not honest with themselves, they are not honest with the neighborhood, and they are not honest with you. Where was Osama bin Laden found? Not in my street. He was found near Pakistan's principal and largest military academy. So the question should be, was it known to the Pakistani military or no? If it was known, it's a guilt, it's a sin. If it was not known, it's a double sin. How come you have nuclear device, but you don't know who lives 15 kilometers away from your largest nuclear plant, laboratory? So that country, by the very nature of its conduct, is a danger to you and to us. But don't ask, we have to negotiate. Sure, we have to negotiate, not for the sake of Afghanistan alone, for the sake of the whole world. And our criteria for measuring our relationship with Pakistan is Has terror attacks decreased in my country? No. Have they closed safe havens in Pakistan? No. Have they forced out the Taliban leaders from their country? The answer is no. So for as long as there is terrorism, for as long as there is this proxy conflict, for as long as Pakistanis try to influence the situation in Afghanistan through the barrel of terrorist guns, regardless of the developments within Pakistan, the relationship with Afghanistan will not see much improvement.
What is your reaction? Why not set up such an interim government to try to reach a peace?
I want to borrow a very good phrase from United States Ambassador to Kabul, Ambassador John Bass, who tweeted this afternoon telling Imran Khan that Afghanistan is not a cricket ball to be tampered. So he should understand that he is now in seat of power and he's not a cricketer, and he should be very careful with a country which is very old, which is very proud, and which is also, in a way, far mature than his. We are poor, and that is the clear fact. But we are too heavy for Imran Khan to tamper with.
If that, though, means talking peace, coming to a deal with the Taliban, which would thereby remove Pakistan's influence, if you're correct, in Afghani daily life, isn't that a price worth paying?
Well, we are not saying we should remove Pakistan's influence on Afghanistan. We say we must legitimize Pakistan's influence in Afghanistan. If they respect us, if they see us as a state, if they see us as a nation, if they see us as an equal neighbor and partner, they can have massive legitimate interest and influence in Afghanistan, and no Afghan will oppose that. But if they want to put a gun on our head and then they say and ask us to accept their dictate, that will never happen. Afghans are ready to pay even a higher price and not be dictated. The dichotomy about Afghanistan is we are very poor, but in the meantime very proud. A lot of people think to come here and exploit our poverty and push us into becoming docile or accept domination. We have resisted and we will resist. Poverty has never been an excuse for Afghans to look down and bow down. We have always stood tall and proud. We will continue to do that. So my message for the Pakistanis is, you can have in us a very proud partner inviting you to partner with us in economy, to partner with us in development, to partner with us in an economic development and regional integration. But if you want to play 19th century game to subdue us, you are mistaken, you are wrong. We are too heavy for you to punch.
As officers. But now, can we negotiate with the Taliban? And who are the Taliban? Where are they? I have said this time and again, we kill a lot of expendable Taliban. If you read about Afghanistan's situation, you will find out NATO killed this number of Taliban in this province or that province. But these are expendable Taliban. These are foot soldiers who are sent from sanctuaries, who are sent from Pakistan to be killed in Afghanistan. The number of real Taliban killed is minimum. The only big name that has been killed from the Taliban leadership is Mullah Dadullah, who dared to venture out from Pakistan and came to Helmand back in 2007, and he did not survive for 2 months. He was killed. So the Taliban Command and Control Center is not in my soil. It's not in Afghanistan. So what do they want? Why they are not coming to the negotiations? There is a perception problem Perhaps it's not perception, perhaps it's a reality. Pakistan and Taliban believe that they are about to win the marathon. It is another mile that they have to run. If they have managed to stay relevant for 13 years, they can wait another year. And they can wait another year, they can wear down the patience of NATO and United States, and they are hoping to have a stronger position in the, for bargaining in the negotiations table. Now, let us have a jump and say we are in 2014 and we have this, oddly decorated table where on one side we sit and on the other side the Taliban. What do they want? If Taliban become democratic, which is our dream, which is our wish, which is what you want, which is what we want, they will melt down. Democratization of the Taliban will mean death of the Taliban, and they know it. So therefore, their aim is to remain militant, but in the meantime, eventually enter into a ceasefire arrangement with Kabul. I have used the example of Lebanon. The Taliban dream is to remain something like Hezbollah, where they have a share of the power, but they remain a state within the state. They will control territory, they have some capability to deliver services, and they have their guns. If the arrangement does not suit their interest, they have the ability to resort to violence and fighting again. That theoretically means two states emerging in Afghanistan. One which has had a pro-Taliban mentality. This is not Taliban, so, sorry.
This is just Pakistan.
Yes. And parts of the country are under their control. In that type of a situation, the Afghan society will be deeply fragmented and we will not have a stability. So the ideal situation will be to DDR the Taliban, disarm them, demobilize them, and reintegrate them, which they don't want.
Now, I say, let us start negotiations today. Have we changed some of the very basics for which NATO went to Afghanistan? If not, so you sit with the enemy around the negotiations table. We are demanding them of what? They are not under pressure. Who are under pressure? The US military in the Afghan villages. They go and they kill the outer circle of the Taliban, the middle circle of the Taliban, but not the inner circle of the Taliban. The outer circle are the opportunists. The middle circle, all those commanders who go to Pakistan, receive training, receive resources, come back, and they lead these small groups. The inner circle is so well protected that a grocer can claim to be one of them and start negotiations. That is where we need to put pressure. Put pressure on the inner circle, on the leadership, so they see the heat and come to talks and to terms.
If it is not the religion, why we are talking about accommodating a group of throat cutters in our state system or in our society? That is belittling of the agenda of creating a humane and civilized society in Afghanistan. Now, a British soldier was cut into pieces broad daylight in London or near London. Will British government ever, instead of putting that guy to justice, will put him in a 5-star hotel and say, brother, what made you do this? Can we accommodate your grievances? That is what the West is expecting us. To bring the killers of our brothers, to bring those who cut the noses of the Afghan women, to bring those who do suicide bombings in our wedding parties, to put them on the other side of the table and say, brother, you represent a religion and I have lost my direction, let us talk. That is because there is not much respect for the dignity of a nation called Afghanistan when it comes to geopolitics. Thank you.
David.
We are a poor third world country. We know our limitations. We are very modest. We say our enemy is not defeated. Your stated goals and objectives not met yet. Your promises are not fulfilled. The morality, politics, and principles of being a superpower requires you to be here. But if you decide the other way, it's your decision. I can't stop them. But if they withdraw, it doesn't mean I stop. We are very clear in that also. We will continue because we are from here. And these mountains will remain forever. And these rivers will flow forever. Yeah, it will be great to have them. But if they leave us, it won't mean we will cease to exist.
We were asked by the international community, and we were asked by our foundational ally, United States, for the sake of peace, release 5,000 Taliban. We released over 5,000 Taliban, amongst them 60 high-profile drug smugglers, amongst them the mastermind of the German embassy bombing, amongst them the killer of the Australian nationals, amongst them the killer of the French citizens, amongst them the kidnappers of the Indian nationals, amongst them some of the worst criminals who had committed crimes against the humanity. But we did take this risk to show our determination for a peaceful end to this situation and reaching a political settlement. The Constitution of Afghanistan does not and did not allow the president to do this. So he had to go to the people of Afghanistan, and the people of Afghanistan expressed themselves in a lawyer jirga, and they gave moral authority and moral mandate to the president for the sake of peace, for the sake of reaching a political settlement. Drink this bitter juice and release these prisoners. The president did. It was not a sweet decision. It was not a popular decision. It's a decision that's still haunting us because in return we have received nothing. We have not received even a day of peace, contrary to the promise that the Taliban had made to the United States negotiating team in Doha.
I think it is fair to say that you hated the Doha peace deal that the Trump administration brokered with the Taliban and which you ultimately accepted. You hated it from the very beginning. I just want to ask you a personal question. The Americans really wanted you in your government to release hundreds and hundreds of Taliban prisoners as a part of that deal. Reluctantly, you did so. I believe you released several thousand. We now understand that hundreds of those prisoners are back on the front lines and are actively fighting for the Taliban and killing your forces. I just want you to tell me, in a personal way, how you feel about the way the Americans handled that issue.
Stephen, you nailed it, but I would like to use my own words to explain to it. We are not party to the Doha Agreement. We are not in it. It's an agreement between United States and the Taliban. U.S. Special Envoy for this particular matter, Ambassador Khalilzad, said that the agreement has 4 parts. It is about ceasefire, it's about political settlement, it's about withdrawal, and it's about separating Taliban from global terror networks. If any of these 4 pillars is not done, the whole thing is not done. So the sequencing was wrong, and the reason I did not buy the Doha Agreement is exactly because of what you said. We released 5,500 prisoners. 85% of them are back in the battlefield. Amongst those prisoners, there were up to 60 major drug dealers who were not arrested as Taliban, but they bribed the Taliban to be, named Taliban and thus get out of the Afghan jails. Each of them were in prison for 20, 30 years. So when you clearly nailed it down, the Doha Agreement is not working as it was envisioned. So it needs revision, it needs review, and it needs modification. And we are not party to it.
But isn't
we
the
are not
truth,
party to it.
Isn't the truth, Mr. Vice President, that for very clear personal reasons, you will never be prepared to make peace with the Taliban? You are a fighter, you're a protege of the Northern Alliance's leader, Ahmed Shah Massoud. You've made a life confronting the Taliban. They've tried to kill you. They and their associates in different militia organizations have tried to kill you on many different occasions. One infamous incident in 2019 when suicide bombers went to your campaign headquarters. They killed more than 30 people. You're one of the few people to escape alive. You and the Taliban are in a blood feud to the end, aren't you?
As a patriot nationalist Afghan, I am ready to suppress my personal feelings. And I will be a drop in the sea of the national feelings in the country, and the national sentiment and the national feeling is for peace.
So you think the US has made a mistake by trusting the Taliban?
I think the way they conducted the talks with the Taliban, the outreach itself was not a mistake, but the massive concession so far given to them was a mistake. The US delegation came to us, they swore to every holy scripture that if you release these 5,000 people, based on these assurances, there will be no violence, but the Taliban, in order to protect their prestige with their fighters, they will not announce it. We told them at the highest level that this is our intelligence and it indicates otherwise. If we do this, violence will spike. Violence spiked. Why did we give that concession? In return for absolutely nothing.
How strong are Al-Qaeda in the country today?
It's not about their strength, it's about their quality. Al-Qaeda did not send 17 battalions to the United States. They sent 17 bombers. So I think it's the quality of Al-Qaeda presence. It's those small cells which are allowed to operate, train, have a breathing space, have a territory. They are still embedded with the Taliban.
What are the status of the peace talks between you and the Taliban? Are you really hopeful that there will be a power-sharing agreement at the end of it?
What is the status of the talks? The Taliban completely misinterpret their agreement with the Americans. They think the world has 2 superpowers, Washington and the Taliban. That is how these talks with US is interpreted by the Taliban. So bringing them back from the sky to the earth and telling them you are a group takes time. Plus, Taliban, at best, when polls have been conducted, secretly, half secretly, or openly, have never enjoyed more than 10% popularity and acceptance in Afghan society. This CIA, as the most powerful intelligence agency in the whole world, they know Taliban are an Afghan brand of Al-Qaeda. I don't put this word in their mouth. If they make a crude deal with Al-Qaeda, that's their thinking. I can't stop it, but I am telling them as a friend, and as an ally, that trusting the Taliban without putting a verification mechanism is going to be a fatal mistake.
So what kind of verification process do you think you will see from the talks that you're holding with the Taliban? Because you're also talking to them at a time when you're saying they're continuing violence.
Right. But we are calling a spade a spade. We are not giving a nice fake title to the Taliban. We say you are terrorists, but you are a reality. We would like to find a solution through talks.
Thank you.
Why do you think that President Karzai and the international community, the West, are wrong to try to talk to moderate elements of the Taliban?
Well, the problem is there is no such thing as moderate elements in the Taliban. The leadership of the Taliban and their philosophy are not very much different from Al-Qaeda. Reintegration is a different thing. You reintegrate the expendable part of the Taliban, the fighters, the rural boys who have joined them. But at the leadership level, they are all hardliners.
So,
can you foresee a future in which the Taliban is part of the government of Afghanistan?
That future can be tomorrow, but they think they will die in that type of future. That's why they are behaving. They are trying to maintain their habitat away from civilization, away from integration, away from new Afghanistan, because they are afraid that in a pluralistic society, which Afghanistan today is, Taliban will become another loud cleric, mullah, preaching after death.
In the past, you've come out against negotiating with the Taliban. You've said it would give them legitimacy and space to militant extremism. If you're saying that a negotiated solution is not the solution, then what is the solution? It can't be a military solution because you've tried that for 16 years and failed miserably.
We have not tried the military solution in full scale in the last 16 years. That is a myth. United States had a very light footprint in Afghanistan from 2001 to 2008 and even 2009. They brought in what they call a military surge only in 2009, and they brought it with a flawed political strategy, which was to say that we are only here for 4 years, then withdraw regardless of the situation on the ground. It was a calendar-based military surge, but they also forgot another harsh reality, which is the existence of sanctuaries for leadership of the Taliban, for ideology of the Taliban, for financial networks of the Taliban in Karachi, in Islamabad, in Peshawar, in Quetta. So therefore, we have not failed. We have not recognized the problem as a global community, and that recognition and realization is a must.
Elections. But they do control half the territory of your country, even as we speak.
That's totally wrong. They don't control half of the country. They are able to spread fear in half of the country. They don't control it.
Right.
My view is there must not be a deal with the Taliban.
Ever?
Ever. That if there is a deal, we will resist against the deal. We, meaning all the forces who fought the Taliban. There must be a process. And based on that process, Taliban should become part of the society and play according to the script of democracy. They should be demobilized, disarmed, reintegrated. And that process will bring a lasting stability. Deals never bring stability.
I just want to pick up on the point you're making. Zalmay Khalilzad, the US envoy, clearly appreciates what he sees as a constructive role by the Pakistanis. He was quoted in the New York Times just a couple of days ago. I appreciate their hospitality and resolve to push for Afghan peace. We're heading in the right direction with more steps by Pakistan coming that will lead to concrete results.
Well, let me also quote Khalilzad's boss, President Trump, who said, Pakistan, you cannot fool me. We have given you $30 billion and you have supported terrorism. This is time you come to senses and deliver. That is also from Khalilzad's boss, President Trump. So we should give weight and we should give importance to the first man in America, to the White House statement. That's coming directly from the mouth of President Trump. So I echo what President Trump has said, and his South Asia strategy is a very sound strategy, and I hope all efforts of Mr. Khalilzad is in the context of South Asia strategy.
There are talks, some led by the Americans, others by the Russians, that have engaged the Taliban. And I was reading they're going to Pakistan next week, perhaps, to have more talks with your neighbours there. In those processes, your government is significant by its absence. You're not involved in those talks. You're not at the table. Is this a humiliation for you?
We are strong enough not to be worried about intellectual exercise or think tank.
You don't think these talks are serious?
If they don't go through Kabul, they are always going to be intellectual exercise. Well, the problem is the Taliban, so far they have gained unnecessary elevation. They have gained very false confidence. So they believe that the negotiations with Afghanistan government is unnecessary, and United States just wash its hand and go away and let them to start a campaign of massacre and take power by conquest. Remember, Mark, Taliban in their very, very core are no different from Pol Pot. Only their religion is different. Their behavior is nothing different than Pol Pot. They don't believe in inclusivity. They don't believe in pluralism. They don't believe in engagement with the communities. So therefore, they have a very wrong impression and understanding of the Doha Agreement. And we have to bring them back to the reality, back to the ground, and tell them you are a group. You are not a state. You are not even a dominating group. And I think the wrong way of negotiating with them gave them unnecessary and false confidence.
When I hear Mr. Saleh, I mean,
they think they are the superpower on this end of the world, and they are talking to another superpower. De-elevating them, bringing them down, requires a lot of effort. And we have told the United States that you should use your political and diplomatic might to make them understand that they are a group at best. They are not a state. They are not even a dominating group.
Should the Afghan government take any responsibility in this themselves?
Do Afghans have influence over Washington? No. Will they ever have? No. They are a global power, not because they listen. They are global power because of other facts.
The reality is that if the Allies and the United States were to pull out, you'd have to sue for peace to the Taliban, possibly on their terms, because you don't have the capacity to keep the fight up.
Well, I mean, let's put this straight. We are not a country that have been invented by the West. We were not born on September 12, 2001. We are a very old country, a very old nation. We have fiercely fought for our dignity and honor and independence. We will continue to exist post-Western withdrawal if that happens anytime soon, which I am not sure. So this is a psychological offensive on Afghans, that you are so dependent that if there is no West, you cease to exist as a state, or you cease to exist as an entity. I completely disagree with that. We will be able to fight for our people, for our country.
Well, let
and
me
of
put
course,
you...
with the West, it will be an added value. What you see in a lot of books written about Afghanistan, they say these are patchwork of tribes, a network of tribes who have never been loyal to a state system. They are more loyal to their ethnicity, to their kin, to their village, to their community. And the West has gone there to instill an idea and a concept which is totally alien to the Afghan roots, to the Afghan culture, and to the Afghan history. And that is the idea of a central state, democracy, rule of law, to a nation, to a country which has never been used to it. This is completely wrong. We have been used to rule of law. We have been very loyal to the state system in Afghanistan. But all of that came to an abrupt end, and I want to briefly touch upon the reasons why the Afghan loyalty to the state system came to an abrupt end. One superpower invaded my country in the 80s, Soviets. Another superpower spent billions of dollars through NGOs, non-government organizations, to shatter our loyalty to the state structure. NGOs that were active in Afghanistan during the 80s and 90s, their purpose was not to strengthen the loyalty of the Afghan people to the system. Their entire aim was to break our psyche and say, the state is your enemy, destroy it. So with those billions of dollars and very sophisticated weapons, we destroyed a state system in Afghanistan because it was regarded communist, godless, infidel, oppressor, etc., etc. And we destroyed it in alliance with the West. When the objectives were achieved, i.e. in 91, 92, we were abandoned. Then there came the period of abandonment. From 92 to 2001, Afghanistan was abandoned by its powerful allies of 80s, United States, Arabia, Europe, China. And in that period, we sunk into a very deep crisis where new powers in the region wanted to manipulate Afghanistan. Pakistan, obviously benefiting from extremism and the idea of manipulating Afghanistan through jihad, wanted to dominate Afghanistan, and we were facing the phenomena of the Taliban.
Why has Afghanistan struggled so hard to find peace?
Well, it's our location. Of all the things, it's our location. It's a very good location, but it's also frontier of big powers. And we are never left by ourselves. We are never left alone.
You say your president was wrong or is wrong to try to talk to the Taliban. You've told him that, have you, many times?
Sure. That's why I resigned. I am not anti-peace. I am anti-destroying the fortress of Afghan pluralism for the sake of appeasing the Taliban.
Is that the But your main area of disagreement was on this, that President Karzai thinks it's right to engage with moderate elements of the Taliban, and you say no.
No, you cannot work in a system which fluctuates in its views and policies and has no consistency. One day you are killing the Taliban as enemies of Afghanistan. The next day, without relying on accurate information, you call them sons of the soil and my brothers. That won't work. No. I have not said don't talk. I have said never resort to appeasement policy. Have a plan B. Don't reverse the achievements in order for the enemy to trust you. Don't sever your ties with your key allies in order for the enemy to trust you. Treat them as the enemy. You know, it is very simple logic. While you talk to your enemy, you do not remove your hand from the trigger. That is what Karzai was trying to do. Without having any gesture from the enemy, he was, as I said, on the verge of destroying the fortress of Afghan pluralism in order to appease the enemy.
Would you just briefly return to the military element? If you say that some of the elements that made this possible are also other places in Afghanistan, what prevents this from happening again in other provinces, maybe in southern Afghanistan?
The president of the country did something extraordinary. He appointed me, his opponent, to lead the investigation, which in the third world is not common. You don't trust your lieutenant, let alone you showing trust to someone who has not supported you. I think that showed three things in him. One, it showed the confidence he has in himself. And two, he really wanted the truth to come out. And three, he wanted to show to the Afghans, you know, we have differences of opinion, of approach, of style, but we see Afghanistan as a common ceiling for all Afghans. So it came as a huge surprise for me. This Ashraf Ghani, who I did not support in the elections, you know, I stood against him, and we brought life in Kabul almost to a halt when there was the fraud issue. And so I did prepare an honest report for him. And today, as I'm speaking to you, he went to Kunduz, and he implemented like 30% of our recommendations in one move.
Nobody could accuse you of not getting involved. You've been, notwithstanding in the past, a critic of President Ashraf Ghani. You've nonetheless decided to join his presidential ticket for the elections in the summer to become a part of what he calls his team of state builders. Why?
Well, it's gracious and kind of him to bring his critics close to him, to trust them. In a country like Afghanistan, which is a very diverse society, a society affected badly by rumors, by conspiracy theories, and it's a country where there is mental fragmentation about a lot of things. When a president feels so confident and secure to bring his critic and his team, that shows his passion for the country and his patriotism, and also in his belief for diversity. So I appreciate it. I have come to join him with my identity. I have not deleted my history. I have not regretted my critique of him, but I am very grateful and thankful of him for opening up the palace and his team and bringing people who have been criticizing him. So, because he believes we are Afghans regardless of where we are, and the Afghan unity is paramount for creating a strong state. And I believe he is a state builder, and I am very honored to join him build a stronger state.
Last April, after an attack in Kabul which killed 25 people, you put out a tweet which said, Islamic State, or Daesh as it's often known, in Afghanistan is fake. Why do you believe that?
Well, because I am an Afghan and I have been intelligence chief, I have been Minister of Interior, I have done a lot of research. The ISIS Khorasan is very largely fake. It's not migrants of the mainstream ISIS from Middle East who have come to Afghanistan. For the Pakistanis to present the Taliban as good boys, they have created another terrorist group called it ISIS-K in order to show that the Taliban can be good terrorists. In fact, the Taliban are like the Microsoft of the so-called ISIS-K, Islamic State Khorasan. They are fake. Defeat the Taliban, there will be no Daesh. Defeat the Taliban, there will be no Al-Qaeda. Defeat the Taliban, there will be no infrastructure left for manifestation of terror in any form in the future. One complication of this process is going to be the socialization of the peace process. We do not want the settlement to be settlement of few guys, few families, or few elite. It has to be socialized at the grassroots level, because the grassroots have paid the cost of war, and if we do not involve them constantly and frequently in what is happening, it may become an elite deal and it will collapse any moment. So therefore, we are of the view that it will be the beginning leading to a framework agreement, the framework agreement leading to the comprehensive agreement. So this three-stage talks, which will enable Afghanistan to see permanent ceasefire, we should not even call it permanent ceasefire. We should call it permanent peace, because ceasefire means between two warring factions. If this is meant to bring all Afghans together, it should be called permanent peace. So it will have turbulence. Taliban will try to use violence to get more concessions. They will try to create more choke points in the highways. They will try to do more extortion to increase their revenue. And each action they do will complicate the peace. And if they create more excuses, it will make it difficult for us to sustain our political and social capital to enter into a deal with them. So therefore, this is going to be one of the most difficult peace negotiations of history. In certain ways, this is going to be even more complicated than the Arab peace process.
You fought against Taliban, and now you are ready to meet them. Have you forgiven them or forgotten what they did?
No, I have not forgiven them. I will not forgive them. I will have not forgotten them. I will never forget them. I do it for the sake of the country, but as an individual, I reserve the right to always be politically on the opposite side of the Taliban. That's my brand. I will never change it. Making peace with the Taliban is neither surrendering to the Taliban nor demanding the Taliban to surrender to us. It's bringing two ways of life under one national ceiling. It will be coexistence. It will not be necessarily one side regretting the other side. In my view, the Taliban are a distortional expression of Islam. They are a deviation in the body of Islam. They are a deviation in the body of the Afghan culture. They are a deviation and a deviated group in the context of our history. They don't represent us. They don't represent me, my family, my country, my community. But because of violence, they have become a reality. The moment they make peace, that very moment they make peace, the society will eat them away within 6 months because they lack political manifest. All they know is a gun in their hand looking at your forehead. The moment they put down that gun, what other skill they have to be used in the society? Nothing. Why should I forgive or forget that type of a group? It doesn't mean I will not embrace peace, but I will always fly their crimes in their face politically. They are criminals. That's it.
What are the biggest challenges, especially with the recent emergencies, ISIS, in addition to the presence, of course, of Taliban?
Daesh, in its roots, in its philosophical roots, cannot take traction in Afghanistan because, as the name suggests, it is Dawla Islamiyya, Sham and Iraq. We are neither Iraq and Sham. We are not Damascus or Iraq. We are Central Asia and we are partially South Asia. So the name does not resonate.
the violence which Daesh has unleashed in Afghanistan, when you see the evidence of where they originate, the origins, the ideological origins of Daesh and the Taliban is the same. The operational platforms are the same. The sanctuaries, some of the sanctuaries are the same. So I suggest if you have time, go and meet some of the Daesh prisoners with us. They come from the same place.
Why they are here? And are they trying to revive the idea that Afghanistan a haven for extremist groups?
This is not a question to be answered in the context of the last 20 years. We are victim of our location. We are victim of our geography. Why Alexander came here and why other world powers came here. This location is a value, it's an asset, but it's also a curse. And at times we have been privileged to use its value and use it as an asset, but at times we have been victim of its curse. We have been victim of the viciousness of our location. There is this flawed philosophy, again rooting in the teachings of Ibn Taymiyyah, that if you take Khorasan, you dominate the world of Islam. That's completely baseless nonsense. But that's what brings them here. They think if we win the battle of Khorasan, we win the battle of the Muslim world. Of course, they are stuck in the medieval times. Ideologically, they are stuck in the medieval times, but the weapon they have is a modern weapon. So there's no compatibility between their thinking and their weapons and viciousness. So it has ideologically, it has very little to do with the environment we have. And plus, the interest of the global powers in Afghanistan makes us a magnet, both for powers and for these groups. And we become this chocolate nakedly out in the street with all the flies and bees coming to eat us. How are we going to make sure that the writ of the government, the control of the government, reaches to all corners of the country? It's up to the settlement, up to the peace process. The settlement has to ensure safety for everyone, respect for everyone, respect for diversity. If I try to put a tie in the neck of the Taliban, the peace process will fail. But if they try to put a turban on my head, it will also fail. So the solution is a turban and a suit, both under the same ceiling. That is how we look at the peace process. Any side trying to dominate will make it fail. India enjoys massive support in my country for the following reasons. India has no Indian agenda in Afghanistan. Post 9/11, when Afghans requested India to give us scholarships, they did. When we asked India to give us roads, they did. When we asked India to help us in the energy sector, India did. India has not hurt us. And as a nation, you know, that has created a lot of goodwill and sympathy. To India in Afghanistan, if it has influenced Afghanistan, it has influenced Afghanistan through its soft power. Entertainment, education, medicine, media, training of the Afghan civil service, etc., etc. So now Pakistanis say, why you allow India to influence Afghanistan? We said, Amitabh Bachchan doesn't take a visa to come to Kabul. He's on our screens. Right? Salma Dam.
We needed it. Zaranj Dil Aram Road, which provides us an alternative connectivity with the rest of the world. Electricity. No, I think India knows deeply who did it, why they did it, and who were behind it. What we need to do is India harden further its own security structures and also help Afghanistan harden its own security structures. We need to have a much more, far closer cooperation between our security agencies, because policy of appeasement towards Pakistan and policy of imagination that they might change will not work.
But what about the policy? Are you saying then that your own president, Hamid Karzai, he talks about a lot of the Taliban as his Afghan brothers? Would you consider that appeasement?
President Karzai is of the view that he can peel off the Taliban. He can, by calling them brothers, he can bring the expendable Taliban on his part,
right,
and then isolate the leadership and the non-expendables, the hardcore.
Who are in the sanctuaries inside Pakistan.
That has not worked so far, and it will not work. Because the expendable Taliban, of course, they are expendable and they are not decision makers. They are the ones who blow up themselves. They are being used like bullets or guns. But the infrastructure, which at industrial level creates violence and terrorists and send them to Afghanistan, it's a Pakistan-based industry. So if you do not dismantle that industry either through tough talk or through bilateral agreement or pressure, just by either luring the expendables away or killing them, this will not finish.
So and in this, a lot of Indians, analysts, think tankers, policy wonks, still believe that the Pakistani establishment believes in its old concept of strategic depth inside Afghanistan. Would you agree with that?
I very, very much hope that India is not reawakened by another Mumbai or Parliament attack, because Pakistan has not changed.
What are you saying? Is that a warning?
It's not a warning, but you know, when you have a period of lull, then you try to imagine that Pakistan has changed. It has not changed. It's a matter of time before they strike again, bite us or bite part of India. In Afghanistan, they constantly hurt us. They attack us almost every day. We have not seen change in the basics of Pakistani strategy, which is keeping the Taliban as a proxy army to destabilize Afghanistan.
Including the...
Then, the then entertainment of the time was Friday night's movie. By the way, it was not Friday nights, it was Thursday nights, but Afghans mistake always Thursday nights with Friday nights. So we would all wait so that the news hour, 1 hour reading about the progress of what the regime was doing, then wait for the Indian movie to be played. And what we liked as teenagers about Indian movies, the moment girl and boy looked eye to eye, few seconds later there would be dance around a tree. Amazing. And they would go to a park where nobody else would be there, and they would continue to dance. And the villain would appear, either disturbing this relationship or something. We love to go to the chase part of the movie, the fight, as if we didn't have enough fight in our lives. So we wanted to watch more in the Indian movies. In the Indian movies, always the villain failed, or either at the end of the movie he would apologize. That is what we want the Taliban to do. Either at the end of this movie, apologize or fail. That is the Afghan sense of reconciliation. Okay, I am a very, very legitimate target. And if they kill me, I have told my family and my friends not to complain about anything, because I have killed many of them with pride.
So last couple of questions, Mr. Saleh. And among the first days of your campaign, your office was attacked. It was gutted. There was this big suicide bomb. Who was behind it?
Well, I have simplified it. I have said it could be the hand of anyone, but the brain was the brain of the eyesight.
And you are sure about that?
Absolutely. Like back of my hand, yes, I am sure of.
You survived by the skin of your teeth. Can you just describe a little bit about what happened?
They used one track bomb to massacre my guards outside the building. It was a flat. It was an apartment building. But we had built it high standards to resist such an eventuality. They used a Corolla bomb, and then they used a rucksack bomb to open one of the armored gates, and then they stormed the building with several suicide bombers. They managed to get into my personal office maybe within 5 to 6 minutes, but by then I had moved to the rooftop, where I had a cache of weapons for such an eventuality. I and 6 of my staff, who had done this rehearsal for such a troubled day, we resisted. They tried to come and take the roof. They couldn't. And then I managed to escape, but 30 people were killed.
You were shooting from the roof, you yourself?
Yeah, at the corridor. Yeah. There was a little corner shielding us from the suicide bomber. He threw 18 grenades by his grenade launcher, and one of my guards at the roof got wounded. I sent him for treatment a couple of days later to Delhi. He recovered, and then I managed to escape to the house next door, and the owner of the house, they were massacred. The wife, the son, the grandson, the daughter-in-law, they were all massacred.
In that same attack?
In that same attack, yes.
So how did you escape to the house?
Well, it's we put a ladder to the neighbor's roof, and they attacked the ladder. Then some of my PSD, personal security detail, they put the window under fire from which they were shooting the ladder, and it was like 3-4 meters, not a big distance. And then I had to jump to the roof next door. One of us who did the jump, he got his backbone fractured, but I was unhurt. Then we went out, and the fight continued for another 8 hours until the whole building was literally blown up to melt them down, because they used explosive which impacts downward to make holes in the roof, and then throw a lot of hand grenades and explosives to kill them. They were all killed, and after 8 hours I went back to my office to see my massacred friends and colleagues.
Mr. Saleh, first of all, thank you so much for speaking to the print, and second of all, be safe, and we wish you all the best in your political journey ahead.
You know, I was going to, in the beginning of this interview, to introduce you to the safe measures if this building was to attack. I don't want you to be casualty of interviewing me.
I will be absolutely fine.
It's still not clear how much support Saleh has and whether it does come from across the ethnic divide, but he is optimistic.
But we will not remain grassroots forever. This is one day going to be
a national level political movement.
Where does Amrullah Saleh prefer to be? The head of intelligence, interior minister, or as vice president?
You see, I don't want to answer this question in a very egoistic way. In my background, I come from a very, very poor, economically very poor family. My father was a laborer, and he died when I was a kid. My brothers were killed when I was a kid. Whatever I have is the gift of this country, the gift of this identity, and I owe my country so much. Whatever I can do, whether it is planting a tree or, you know, putting a hand on shoulder of an orphan, or contributing to the environment of Afghanistan, or writing 2 lines about its pride and history, I have never sought a status. I have sought a role, not a status. The status has come by itself, and I am not hiding my past. Without Afghanistan and without this identity, I would have been one of the unknown 7 billion people of this earth. So this soil, with all its troubles, has given us so much pride, so much pride. And I owe it to my country. So it doesn't matter where I am. I belong to it.
You survived numerous assassination attempts. How did that affect you? Do you still fear for your life?
If I say I don't fear, it will be a lie and arrogance. Fear is part of the human trait. It's part of our psyche. But I'm not afraid of death. No. When it happened, I was about 4 or 5 meters away from the 2 suicide bombers, but there was this corner between us, and they were unable to pass this and hit me, but they shot 19 grenades. My guards were wounded, and 30 people were killed. I survived. But if you look at the attack on me, it is one of the 1,000 attacks. That's why I don't talk about it, because a lot of Afghans whose blood was also red got killed. And I don't provide any extra label to my blood. Had they been able to kill me, okay. I have never regretted fighting them. I have never regretted arresting them. I have never regretted standing against them to provide a space for a pluralistic Afghanistan.
His resistance was not about him. I am coming to the end of my commentary, speech, whatever you like to call it, and I would like to carry that legacy with me if I ever was to be asked how Masood's legacy can be incorporated into the negotiations with the Taliban. We were in Ashgabat, and I had a job that after each meeting with the Taliban leaders, I would call him on satellite phone and brief him about the sessions of that day. As a young, inexperienced, excited person, I was lured by the Taliban concessions, who said, Amrullah, tell your boss, we are not going to disarm him for 5 years. We are going to give him autonomy in the region he controls for 5 years. We would like to create a parliament. We will ask him to appoint 20% of the parliament members. We will appoint the 80% ourselves. After 5 years, once he is assured that we are not against him, we will fully incorporate him in the system. I got excited. I called Masood. I called him. He had this sweet adjective he would use for people he thought he was close to. Gangs, the dizzy. I called him and told him the story. He said, "Dizzy man, you are not there to negotiate my fate. You are there to negotiate the fate of the country. Tell these mullahs, I want nothing. I want one vote for one person. I do not want an intelligence conspiracy instilled in the body of a blind mullah to wake up in the morning and say, God has assigned me to torture a nation. I will stand against that torture. Tell the Taliban, I want no autonomy. I want all of Afghanistan. I don't want a selected parliament. I want an elected parliament. And tell the Taliban, the vote has to be for men and women. If they do not agree to these terms, all you do is smile and leave that meeting." The next day, I was not the chief negotiator. The chief negotiator was Yunus Qanuni. We communicated this to the Taliban negotiator, Maulavi Mutawakkil. We said, "Very respected Maulavi, we are not here to negotiate the fate of Commander Masood. We are here to negotiate the fate of a nation. And the fate of that nation should not be decided by you or by me. They should be allowed to decide their own fate, and that comes from franchise, and that comes from going to their heart and telling them what they want." You know what his response was? He said, "Masses are always ignorant. It is the elite which we should negotiate with." That is why we say we do not want peace of the elite. We want peace of the masses. Peace has to be socialized. Peace has to be socialized by a peasant, by a shepherd, by a shop owner, by a barber, by a woman, by the smallest Afghan. Peace of the elite will ensure survival of the elite at the cost of the marginalization of the masses. That we will not want. We want the peace. Desirability for peace is now pan-Afghan. It is global. But let us be very clear. Peace is not meaning showing concession to the Taliban at the expense of the wishes of the majority, absolute majority of the Afghans. And peace should not legitimize illegitimate interest of any external country interfering in our affairs. It should provide a space, dignified space for legitimate interest of all our neighbors. But if the peace, the cost of peace, is imposition of illegitimate, disgraceful interest of others upon us, that was resisted yesterday, it will be resisted today, and it will be resisted the day after. In order for us to have the legitimacy, the strength, and the courage to sign a peace deal which is implementable, it has to be peace of the masses. And the masses, what do they want? 86% of the people under the Taliban control have said they want republic. At the peak of their popularity, the Taliban did not gain more than 5 to 10% acceptance in the Afghan society. Let us not enlarge them. They are a violent group. Of course, they dominate the agenda because of the sheer violence. Few days ago, I said the moment they make peace, the society will melt them down. Because apart from a flawed message for the afterlife, the Taliban lack message for today, for life. You cannot answer every question with a message, oh, wait for death. You will be glorified in the afterlife. That's what that they keep saying.